Hi everyone, so I'll try and keep this video as short as possible because with my current bandwidth here, unless I keep it as short as possible, by the time it uploads you'll all have graduated. So this is going to be on the thorny topic of post-truth, conspiracy theories. As I said in the email I sent around yesterday, think about QAnon, but we're also going to think about things like ClimateGate and anti-vax, flat earth, etc. All that wonderful stuff. And the question for a scientist is, how do we counter that? Can we counter that? What should our strategies be to try to counter that, this flood of misinformation? Before that, a little bit of housekeeping, as they say. So, coursework deadlines, apologies for having to cancel last week's session. For that reason and for a number of other reasons, I've pushed back the coursework deadline to this Friday. So as you can see up there, it's a Physics World article, as you know, 900 words, 30%. So I need to stress, a number of you have contacted me about this. The article does not have to be formatted in that 2 or 3 column style that Physics World uses. This is about your writing style. It's not about your typesetting skills and the sort of overall formatting. It's more about the style and the audience you're trying to communicate to and the way in which you communicate. Right. Okay, let's get straight into this. There's a few very recent headlines within the last few months about this QAnon thing. If you haven't heard about this QAnon thing, don't worry. In a slide or two, I'm going to give you a very brief overview outline of what QAnon is from a Guardian article a few weeks ago even. As you can see in that New York Times article, QAnon was a theory on a message board. Now it's headed to Congress. It's incredibly influential. QAnon explained the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory gaining traction around the world. As you can see, the visibility of the online movement has surged as a supporter appears headed to Congress, and Trump fails to debunk claims on a number of occasions now, because he knows on which side his bread is buttered. So what is QAnon? QAnon, I have to try and stop myself banging my head against the keyboard as I read this out, which would make it very difficult to read. QAnon is a baseless internet conspiracy theory whose followers believe that a cabal of Satan-worshipping Democrats, Hollywood celebrities and billionaires runs the world while engaging in paedophilia, human trafficking and the harvesting of a supposedly life-extending chemical from the blood of abused children. QAnon followers believe that Donald Trump is waging a secret battle against this cabal and its deep state collaborators to expose the malefactors and send them all to Guantanamo Bay. It's like we've drifted into some parallel universe. Who'd have thought in 2020 this is where we'd be? But this is where we are. And dismissing it is not an option. Should point out, I've got my, as a lefty academic, of course I've got my tried and trusted sources. But this is not just restricted to the right-leaning papers. Here's the Telegraph and another paper that I usually never ever mention. Dealing with the Telegraph headline there first. This, as you can see, is 23rd of October, so pretty timely. How I fell into a terrifying conspiracy theory wormhole on YouTube. Among the former QAnon believers who say algorithms on social media are helping fuel the spread of conspiracy theories. Now, when you're at the point where the Daily Mail is describing something as bizarre, we're in a very bad place. You can see that poll, it's a YouGov poll. Half of Donald Trump's supporters believe QAnon's, of course with the characteristic capitalisation from the Mail, believe QAnon's bizarre central claim that he is working to end a child sex trafficking ring run by top Democrats. You can see that 50%, but even amongst just registered voters, 24%, and even amongst Biden supporters, 5%. And this is not just an online thing, it's not just an internet thing. We can see, it's influencing voting preferences. That's going to may well play a big role tomorrow. But beyond that, here's just a few headlines. QAnon follower who blocked bridge near Hoover Dam pleads guilty to terrorism charge. He wasn't seeking to kill a mob boss, he was trying to help Trump. Another QAnon conspiracy theories. Just back in April, QAnon devotee live streamed her trip to New York to take out Joe Biden. And the FBI is very worried conspiracy theories like QAnon could fuel extremist violence. And this is not just a small clique or a small cult, it's growing rapidly and it's growing scarily. Another Guardian report, very recent, revealed QAnon Facebook groups are growing at a rapid pace around the world. more than 4.5 million aggregate followers. This is something we ignore at our peril. Quite how we challenge it, quite if we can challenge it, if there's anything we can do is another matter entirely, but ignoring it is certainly not an option. Back in PPP a number of years ago, 2016, around about the time that guy in the centre came to prominence, or even more prominence, post-truth named Word of the Year by Oxford Dictionaries. What does post-truth mean? Relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. That's, as scientists, our job is to try and move beyond the sort of emotional, subjective interpretation of data and make things as objective as possible. Now, over the last few weeks with PPP, we've been talking about, different biases and different skews and how we try to work around those and how we try to minimize those. This is something else entirely. Post-truth is you don't even attempt to be objective. You just believe whatever plays to your gut. And as Carl Sagan said, when asked for a gut reaction to something, his argument was, well, we really shouldn't think with our gut. I'm going to step back about a decade, and this is something called ClimateGate. I don't know how many of you are familiar with ClimateGate. It was basically University of East Anglia, the climate change centre there, had its emails over the course of many, many years hacked by right-wing activists, let's put it that way, released onto the web. And it created, as you can see, a huge storm of controversy. That's just a few of the very, very, very many headlines. There was a documentary last year, ClimateGate, Science of a Scandal. As you can see there, a global storm of controversy. And Paul Nurse there, down in the bottom right corner, freedom of information laws are used to harass scientists. That's something that just grinds my teeth a little bit for reasons I'll come to. But let's just look into ClimateGate for very briefly on the next couple of slides. So this was a Telegraph article, as you can see, back in November 2009. And they basically took excerpts from the emails. You can read through these yourself. The emails were from scientist to scientist, of course. And so they were never meant to be released out there. But all the same, in many cases, this is publicly funded research. And we've got to therefore think about, we've got an obligation in terms of making sure this is in the public domain. And it's a question of what data should scientists hide, if any. So things like, as you can see, I would be emailing the journal to tell them I'm having nothing more to do with it until they rid themselves of this troublesome editor. Can you delete any emails you may have had with Keith or AR4, such as an IPCC report? And then more and more, as you can see, are likely to have to respond to more crop criticisms, etc. Yes, it's tedious. Yes, I am not a climate scientist, so I can only begin to imagine. My email is stuffed enough with, emails from written in multicolored fonts with very many spinning gifs about people who claim to have, discovered a new theory of everything. I can only imagine, if you're a climate scientist, just what your inbox looks like. But all the same, should we hide data? Should we manipulate that data? Manipulate may be too strong a word. Present that data in a way that doesn't sort of tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, no matter how, honourable our intentions might be. Here's a Nature editorial that on ClimateGate, with which I fundamentally disagree. In particular, for that line, ClimateGate did no lasting damage to science. I disagree. In my view, ClimateGate cast a very long shadow, not just over climate science, but science as a whole. Here's a couple of examples. Memo: Fox News reporters ordered to promote ClimateGate conspiracy theory. Fox News is desperately trying to convince us climate science isn't real, and that's a headline from last year, as you can see. So ClimateGate played into this conspiracy aspect of this, that the scientists are hiding something, that there really isn't anything, and it's scientists who are in the pocket of various different cabals and are just trying to fill their pockets with grant money, etc., etc., etc. But the problem is, if we're not entirely open as scientists, we sometimes leave ourselves open to this type of criticism. Partisans far apart in the importance of many issues, including the environment and strengthening the military. So you can see in the traditional blue, we've got Democrat or leaning Democrat, and in the red, we've got Republican, leaning Republican. It's stark when it comes to climate change in terms of percentage who say this should be a top priority for Trump and Congress this year. Climate change, Republican leaning or Republican 21%, Democrat 67%. Now, this is from a New Scientist article. Many liberals like to think this is a product of scientific illiteracy, which if addressed would bring everyone round to the same position, if only. Studies by Dan Kahan at Yale University have shown that in contrast to liberals, among conservatives it is the most scientifically literate who are least likely to accept climate change. Polarisation over climate change isn't due to a lack of capacity to understand the issue, says Kahan. Those who are most proficient at making sense of scientific information are the most polarised. I'm going to continue reading this because particularly as scientists, as physicists, we need to be aware of this. And I think you are, or increasingly you are. But it never harms to repeat this and reiterate this. For Kahan, this apparent paradox comes down to motivated reasoning. The better you are at handling scientific information, the better you'll be at confirming your own bias and writing off inconvenient truths. So a few questions for you, and I'd like to cover these in the synchronous session in a few hours' time. Have you got involved in debates with conspiracists, flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, QAnon, whatever bizarre conspiracy theory you've encountered? I'd really like to hear about your experiences of that, if you're willing to share them either in the chat or by switching on your microphone. Question is this: should we debate or should we ignore them? Regarding the ClimateGate scandal, how open should scientists be with their data? And here's an interesting one. You meet an avowed Trump supporter who believes that climate change is nothing more than a liberal conspiracy. What do you say? How do you convince them otherwise? Can you convince them otherwise? And finally, what should social media do to counter the spread of misinformation? And the reason I put if anything in brackets there is, again, this freedom of speech aspect. Where do we draw the line in terms of countering this spread and the hallowed freedom of speech precept? Okay, I look forward to hearing from you later. It looks like it's going to get very thundery outside. The light levels in the room have dropped dramatically since I started making this. See you later. Thank you. Bye.